What's up, y'all? Bacon here. So today we're going to talk about evictions. Not a very nice subject, but it's been on the news a lot lately. So if you like the video, smash that like button and subscribe. Let's get to it. There's a date that I personally have in mind, and a lot of real estate investors, property owners, and landlords have in mind, is December 31st. Not because it's some New Year's Eve party, but because that is the end of the eviction moratorium. The eviction moratorium basically blocks all processing of evictions. This was brought to you by the federal government due to the beautiful COVID pandemic, which has forced us to stay inside all the time. It's been an amazing year. Thank you, 2020. How most people have heard about it was just based off the news. End of their research. They heard, I no longer have to pay my rent, and you can't evict me. Not the case. First off, I do agree that we shouldn't be allowed to evict tenants during a global pandemic that's killed, at the time of this, roughly 250,000 people in the US, that is. But that still doesn't mean people have free rein to just stop paying their rent. You need to do your due diligence on why you wouldn't have to pay your rent. Most of us do. There's that small group of people, they just don't care. I definitely do agree that we as landlords should not be allowed to evict people aimlessly into the streets during a global pandemic. These people can't pay their rent, not because of their own fault, but because the local city or state government has came in and shut down entire industries. Bars, restaurants, libraries, pick an industry, pick a city. A lot of these cities have been closed down. It's not their fault that they can't pay their bills. The problem is a lot of these people that think that they're not paying, so they're getting one up on the system. They're not getting one up on the system. They're screwing their neighbor, the guy that happens to own their duplex or quad or maybe 10 unit, 15 unit, something like that. They're just screwing them over. Seems that a good portion of renters don't know, or they don't care, that the property or unit that they're renting isn't owned by a billion-dollar company like a Berkshire Hathaway. It's owned by some guy that got a career, saved up some money, purchased a couple properties, whether it's a duplex, single family, medium-sized multifamily. It's just a guy. They're not getting one up on the system. They're screwing over their neighbor. For most landlords, if all the units stopped paying their rent, they wouldn't be able to afford their bills. They wouldn't be able to afford their mortgage, the utilities. Sometimes the utilities, I pay partial utilities for some of my units. We wouldn't be able to save up for CapEx, the items that come up out of nowhere, like your roof needs replaced or broken windows. That stuff happens. We can't keep the property to a level that you have possibly been accustomed to if you just decide to stop paying your rent. The fact that these landlords can't afford to pay the entire mortgage and all the bills on these properties isn't poor business planning. It's literally how the businesses are designed. Their business plan is based off of a gross income, subtract all the utilities and bills, and that's what's left over goes to them. Not all this money is just going to them and they're just pocketing it, and well, if I don't pay them, then they just don't have some extra cash at the end of the month. They can't afford these bills, and it seems like a lot of people aren't looking past the I get free rent. If the government came in and told Target and Walmart or whatever store that they could no longer charge for the products or services that they're delivering, well, how long do you think that they're going to stay open? They're going to close their doors day one. So a little bit of a detail on this eviction moratorium. It is under Section 361 of the Public Health and Human Services. I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say most of the people that are trying to use this moratorium to avoid paying their rent for no reason didn't do their research. They didn't look for a official.gov website to break it down, what the rules and guidelines are behind you not being able to be evicted. If they would have read more into this, they would have seen that the eviction moratorium is purely based off of finances. If you can't afford to pay your rent. I personally have evicted tenants before. I've had to evict tenants for everything other than financial, whether it be smoking in my units, which is prohibited under my lease, noise pollution, which is they've been playing music all night with their doors open, just bothering all of the tenants. Police has been called to the the residents multiple times, just various reasons that weren't financial, which wouldn't have been affected by the eviction moratorium because they were still paying their rent. They were just causing way too many problems in my property. To avoid any type of hate comments, none of my evictions were during the COVID pandemic. So no hate comments. But within the moratorium, it also states that the tenant must exhaust all possible resources for assistance, whether it be government assistance, which we all know that that would be almost useless, or landlord assistance. Contact a landlord, find out what type of payment assistance they may provide. They may provide some type of, all right, well, if you can pay half the rent now, we can extend the rest of it and maybe increase your rent later on. I mean, there's a number of ways that landlords can work with you because we would rather have a tenant in the property than having vacancies. It just looks bad for the numbers. It looks bad if you go to sell. It looks bad if you refinance. And it just causes you more payments in the end, more problems in the end. The vacancies aren't a good thing, so why would we want to actually evict you for no reason? So that's just my 2 cents. But in all reality, I think part of the reason that I haven't really experienced any of this is because we got ahead of the curve. We contacted our tenants immediately, emailed them. My property manager called them. We informed them that, hey, if you do have any type of issues with your payment due to this COVID and you're laid off or you can't work or whatever reason, reach out to us. We're here to work with you and we were here to help you make your payments and stay in your stay in our property. Communication is key. The second, and I hope the majority of the tenants that do fall into the I can't pay my rent are the people that they've been affected by COVID, they've been laid off, they've been furloughed, their pays have been cut. It's a horrible thing, but at the same time, they've probably reached out to their landlord to see what type of payment plans or assistance they can do to work things out with their landlord. These are the people that do know and acknowledge that on January 2nd, when the moratorium is lifted 2 days earlier, obviously January 1st is going to be the hangover New Year's Day that nobody's going to do anything, but January 2nd or January 3rd, whenever the local courthouse opens, you're going to be the landlord's going to be in court, should I say, filing for the eviction immediately. If you've just had somebody leeching off of your unit for, 6 months? How long has this been going on? 9 months now? Like if you've had a tenant that has just been in a unit not paying just because they don't want to pay, well, that's the day you're going to go in to evict them. These people don't realize that from now on, you're going to have an eviction on your record. You're going to pay court fees. You're going to pay attorney fees. If you are even going to fight it, I mean, it's not a good thing to have an eviction on your record. You're not going to be able to then rent the same quality of a place that you previously were, because the majority of landlords, myself included, if you own a C, a B, or an A property, if an eviction's on your record, you're out immediately. I won't even look at you if there's an eviction, a felony, any of those really. I mean, you're starting to limit the quality of place that you'll be able to live in if you've just decided to not pay your rent because I can get free housing and the government said you can't evict me. Finally, when tenants aren't paying their rent, it doesn't just affect the landlord himself and the fact that he now has to cover bills and foot all the bills, because more than likely, if you have enough properties, you can't foot the bill for all of the properties. It affects a lot of other industries, and a lot of stuff apparently people either don't realize or care to acknowledge is the landlord has to pay the banks. The banks aren't going to just stop accepting payments for their mortgages. We still have to pay that. The utility companies, they still want their bills. We can't tell them that we're not going to pay for the water, the electric, if we provide internet services, all the utilities that the landlord may have to pay for out of his pocket, which would come from the gross rents. All those utilities, well, now they're trying to be paying out of his pocket, and that can be pretty costly also, depending on where you live, how your bills run, so on and so forth. And then the big bill that people don't acknowledge is taxes. Taxes, how are taxes going to get paid? If I'm not getting my rents, now I have to pay property taxes on multiple buildings in a city that those taxes are going to schools, roads, sidewalks. The government isn't stepping in and saying, oh, well, you own real estate and you have renters and they can't pay, well then you don't have to pay. It's, all right, well if they can't pay, work out a payment plan because you still have to pay. For taxes, you may be able to work out a payment plan, but at the same time, it just extends the debt of taxes that you're still paying. We can't just move out and say, oh, I don't need to pay those taxes anymore. So when you see this on the news and see all these evictions and everything, it's not always the doom and gloom of what the news portrays it to be, because they're only talking about the fact that tenants can't afford to pay rent. End of the news story. They need to discuss it from the tenant, the landlord, the taxes, the utilities, the mortgages, the banks. I mean, it's a long list of items that are affected by a tenant just not paying rent. And again, like I've said before, I agree that tenants shouldn't be evicted just because, especially during a COVID pandemic that's killing people. But just remember that we're not all a Berkshire Hathaway billion-dollar company. Most of us are just guys and girls working 9 to 5, trying to plan for a quality retirement in the next 10, 15, 20, 40 years. If you like the video, again, smash the like button, subscribe, make some comments if you want something discussed for anything else with finances, career, and what I spend the majority of my money on, travel.